right, we're back. Episode 3. We're just doing this fun live, man. So listen, audience, we could have shut it off. We could have reset the whole link up, or we could have just paused and then we can keep going live and pretend we're doing 2 shows in one, but we're here again. So Keith, Chad, Manuel, 2 dads in a lab trying to be 2% better. Episode number 3 in the books. Keith and Dad got 2 in the bank. Number 3, Chad Hufford joining us again today. Last week on the show, he talked about the experience of going from 0 kids to all of a sudden 4 and then up to 6. And we left you guys with the hook, which was, how do you scale to 6 kids and what's life like? Hotel rooms, buses, intentionality. He had girls first before boys, the nurturing aspect of it. So gentlemen, let's continue the conversation. Chad Hufford, 6 kids. Manuel, let's keep going, guys.
Rock and roll. Well, let's pick it up right there. Because really we're talking about 8 people. When we talk about travel and hotel, vehicles, everything, you got to do 8 now. So you got to just talk about a day in the life. If you were traveling, last time you went on a big trip, I'd like to know, how the heck did you manage the logistics?
How does it work?
Okay, so we talked about, you asked last week, Di, you asked about, what are some of the big things that you do? And I actually mentioned something that's relatively small that I think will have an impact. But we do some of the big things too. We plan 2 big family trips. So the last one was Hawaii, doing that almost every year. We went to Nashville in the spring. Kids got to meet Dave Ramsey and watch him record a show. They thought they were pretty hot stuff, and they had a private tour of the place. But when we land in Nashville, so we've been flying all day, and it's like 12, 13 hours of flying from Anchorage to Nashville. And we land in Nashville. It's 1:00 in the morning. We get our luggage. We get to the rental car place, and they're like, "We don't have the Suburban that you reserved. We have a Tahoe."
Oh no!
And I was like, well, "We're going to be down here for a couple conferences. We're going to be down here for 10 days, and we have luggage for 8 people. We can't get in a Tahoe." And we asked, like, does it have the captain's chairs? He's like, "It does. It has the captain's chairs, all leather. It's really nice." It's like, that's not going to work for us. We have 8. And he's like, "Well, this is all we have. I'm sorry that we couldn't accommodate your preference." I'm like, "Sir, there's 8 of us. We're all really tired. It's not a preference. There are 8 people that need to go into one vehicle. So unless you have 2 Tahoes for us, then it's not going to work. Like, we cannot literally fit inside this car." And he just kept talking about preference. I'm like, which one of my kids do you think I should have walk to the hotel? But it's not a matter of convenience or what we have 8 people that need to fit into a 7-passenger vehicle with all our luggage. Anyway,
what was the rental agency? I need to know the name. I want to know, because these brands got to hear this stuff. Who was it?
It was budget. And we've had a terrible experience 2 out of our last 3 trips. But just to your point, like, when you go from 4 to 5 and then 5 to 6, your choices for vehicles get really small. Basically, it's Suburban, Yukon XL, Expedition Max, or do you want to be van people? Or you want to drive the short bus around? So the hardest thing with traveling is probably vehicles. So what we've been doing is we do a lot of VRBOs. The hotel room thing is really difficult. And part of that is just other areas of our lifestyle. Don't go out to eat a lot, just because of the health reasons, which I'd be really intentional about what we put in our bodies. I love having a VRBO where I have a kitchen and I can cook my own meals, and we can actually sit down around a dinner table and not have, okay, you kids can eat in your room, and then a couple of you kids can eat in our room, and we'll eat around the little ottoman here or something like that. So we stopped doing the hotel room thing a few years ago, and it's honestly usually cheaper to get one rental house than it is to rent 2 or 3 rooms. Air travel, my goodness, my kids are good. I love walking onto a plane with 6 kids. It's like something out of a Clint Eastwood movie. Everybody is just like staring at you. There's tumbleweeds that roll through. They're like, "Please keep walking, please keep walking, please keep walking. Please don't sit by us." And they're just watching you. And I just look at them. Just give them that little stare, like, I could ruin your day right now with 6 kids. But we used to sit back there with them. What we started doing recently is my wife and I like to fly first class. It's a terrible financial decision. People that are still trying to get your building block set, it's a waste of money. Don't fly first class. But we put our kids back in coach. and then we sit in first class. And that's been hilarious too, because there's a couple times where the stewardesses up front are talking about, you would believe there's 6 kids sitting back there with no parents. Like, who does that? And I'm like, we do. That's us. Those are our kids. But they do such a good job traveling. And I'm so proud of them. I'm gonna have them listen to this. Maybe not give them a big head, but the older kids are phenomenal. They're so patient. Again, this doesn't always happen, but these kids can switch it into a new gear when they travel, and they're just. We actually usually have stewardesses coming up saying like, "Oh my goodness, your kids are amazing." Every now and then we hear people complain, but it's almost always like, they were such a pleasure. There's please and thank you and yes sir and yes ma'am, and I'm like, that would be awesome if they did that at home, but they do that traveling. So yeah, that's it. It's been the nice thing was we didn't go from 0 to 6. It was 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2. There's no twins in there, so we got to gradually adapt. And for the first 3 or 4 years, we were trying to get the business off the ground. And we were several years into it, but it was still a struggle. You guys know how it is. Everything was going back to the business. So for the first several years of having kids, a vacation was, we're going to borrow somebody's tent, find some like gravel pad by the side of a road and put that up. So we eased into this. The way we're traveling now is not how we did before, but having those older kids to help out is absolutely priceless.
What do you think the kids see as being part of a family of 6, Chad? Because I'm suspecting many of their peers and your peers, I'm suspecting, aren't typically broods of 6.
Yeah, so we really talk about the team element of
Mm-hmm.
and that sometimes as an individual, as part of the team, you have to give in a little bit of your agenda. So we like football, and a lot of sports would work, but football, I think it is especially helpful because the positions are so unique. You know, with basketball, you've got guys that can get down there and mix it up, get some rebounds, can probably go out to the perimeter, shoot the long ball a little bit. But with football, you're never going to see a center throwing the ball. You're never going to see a running back playing safety. It doesn't happen. So the idea that we're trying to get across is, you may not like the play that's being called, but you still have a role to play, even if it's not the role that you want. But you as a human being, your uniqueness doesn't need to diminish in this. But we all have to sometimes temporarily let go of our own goal or ambition in the moment, not in the long run, to serve the team. But it doesn't mean you give up who you are. It doesn't mean you change who you are. You're a part of the team. You wear this jersey that says Hufford on the back, and you contribute to the team. You sacrifice for the team, but you're still your unique individual. We don't want you to blend into this and just get lost in the crowd. You still have your uniqueness, just like any position at that football field. They'd wear a unique number. They would play a unique position, a very unique role, but it would be for the betterment of the team. So we talk a lot about that as a family and use that as an analogy.
Hey, Di, I'm going to talk in front of Chad's back instead of behind his back. It's hard for me not to hear Chad speak. I'm going on 2 hours with the guy thinking that him and his wife are raising a team of leaders, aren't they? Like, you think about like his analogy of a team, like to raise 6 people, push buttons, embrace buttons, motivate, not motivate, steer them in the right direction. Like, you got to have everything running on every cylinder, don't you, Di?
Definitely. And I had a question coming to mind, which actually will shine a light on this exact idea. And really, it's this idea around how do you ensure, and I'm sure you have a strategy for this with your partner, but how do you ensure that each kid feels seen, heard? Because I know that can be a challenge. I know, like, just even bouncing with 2 kids. Thank goodness my wife is on top of everything. But and I'm just curious, have you noticed anything? Because obviously each kid's unique, right? And they're going to have their own emotional and psychological just identity. And I know that all of us as human beings that are emotional, like, how do you manage that, right? And ensure that they're all feeling seen, heard, safe? I'm just curious, how does it work for you guys?
It's a work in progress, and it is, I think, super difficult because they are so different and unique. And I like what you said, Di, about raising, or I'm sorry, Keith, you said raising little leaders, because we talked so much about in the early years, oh, we want to raise good kids, we want to raise respectful kids, and we realized, no, we don't. We want to raise good adults.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good humans. Good humans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We want good humans coming out of this. And so this is going to tie back to something we talked about in our previous conversation. We talked about, like, as men, we go out and kill, we drag it back to the cave, and we're tough and we protect and all those different things. But I think for me, there was a harmful side of that. And I remember as a little kid growing up, there's 5 of us growing up, so having a big family, 7 of us, 5 kids. I remember my dad only cursed on family vacations. The only time I ever saw him. And I remember one time we were packed in this minivan, and my mom used to pack like she was going on the Oregon Trail. Like, we were gonna be gone for months. And there'd be no stores. We just would need all the supplies the whole time. And so we got like pillows and suitcases like under our arms. We're all crammed in there. We're whining. And I remember my dad saying something one time, and he's frustrated. My parents are bickering at each other up in the front. I don't remember where we were going. We're somewhere in the Midwest where our family is. And he's like, these kids need to be tough. They don't know what tough is. They have it too easy. They need to toughen up. I thought, you know what? He's right. This is ridiculous. I was probably 10 or 11 years old. That stuck with me. Still sticks with me. I spent the better part of the next 10 years trying to be tough. And now I'm trying to figure out how to be tender. Like, how do I have a hard mind and a soft heart? And guys, I struggle with that. And like right now I'm being vulnerable and open with you guys because I think as dads, we need to do that with each other. We need to do that with our kids. And being able to sit in front of my kids, eyeball to eyeball, my beautiful girls, be like, understand. And I know I'm not connecting with you the way that you need sometimes. But I'm doing the best I can. Thank you for being patient with me. And I got to have that conversation a lot because they are all so different. And I'm struggling right now because for so many years of my life, guys, I thought that being tough meant I could cut off my emotions and not feel them. And now I'm just like, it takes a lot more courage to feel what's going on in here. Yeah. And to be able to connect with a 3-year-old boy and then a 15-year-old daughter and make them both feel loved and seen, like I've got to be much more emotionally vulnerable. And it's a huge struggle because for so long I thought that was the antithesis of what being a tough dad looked like. And it's not the antithesis, it's the core. Like until I can be courageous enough to be vulnerable with my kids, then I have not even stepped into courage yet. So sorry guys, that's maybe a lot.
No apologies at all. Dude, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you
for the vulnerability and also for just the openness and transparency, but also your willingness to share. Because I'll tell you what you just said hit a chord with me, and I know it's going to hit a chord with everybody else because that's what happens when we're vulnerable. We instantly feel like I want to put up my hand and be like, dude, me too. Unless we start opening up about this stuff, we walk around thinking no one will get the challenges I'm working on, what I'm trying to do. And I just find that so interesting. Us as men have this challenge with just sharing what's alive and real for us in the moment. And but isn't it powerful when we do? That was amazing, Chad. Thank you. And all we can do is be a work in progress, brother.
And again, I think reminding my kids of that. That's how they feel seen and heard. It's like, again, teenagers, every single day is a crisis. They're trying to,
oh man,
you want to know what emotional decision making looks like. They look at a teenager, but they are trying to figure out where they fit in this world and things like that. So for me to recognize that even though dad looks like he's got it all figured out on the outside, that I don't have the rule book on this, and I'm trying to figure it. You're trying to figure out how to be a teenager. You're trying to figure out how to be a 3-year-old. You're trying to figure out how to be a 5-year-old. I'm still trying to figure out how to be a dad, and I'm really struggling to be more open with that. Not that I cry in front of my kids all the time and vomit out every feeling, but to apologize, to say I failed, I screwed up. Please be patient with me, and tell me what you need. Like, what are you feeling right now when I did this thing or when I failed to do this thing? But that is a huge work in progress for me. And I can see it in my kids that they are becoming more vulnerable. They're opening their heart more because dad is leading and dad's going first.
That's it. Oh, boom. Drop the mics. That's great. I love that. It is. It's all about who's going to go first, man. And you're stepping up and going first. We learn mainly through modeling and mentorship. Those are the 2 primary models we all learn through. And man, what you're saying, but also what you're showing to your family is just amazing. That's just that's the best advice you can give anybody here. Anybody that's catching this right now is just modeling some of the actions that you're doing, Chad, is enough to just get that relationship thriving, I think, because kids will relate to that. Every time I've opened up to my daughters and been very honest with them about how I'm feeling and how I'm struggling, it's amazing how it changes the energy of the conversation instantly.
Yes.
And they'll be the first to give me a big hug and say, "It's okay, Dad. We love you." And God, hearing that, it's just like, oh, man, I wish I told you this like a month ago when I first started feeling this way. You wondering why Dad's been walking around a bit on edge and da 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 da. I should have just talked about this a month ago. And that's on me. That's what I'm trying to reflect on, you know?
I was having a conversation with a dad a few weeks back, and it struck me. He said to me, as a 16-year-old daughter now, and it struck him, gentlemen, where the light went on for him when he said, I need to act around my daughter like the guy that I want my daughter to marry or that I want my daughter to be with. Because if I'm not going to act like that guy, who is she going to be modeled after? And that was a real eye opener for me, because I'm a fool most of the time around my kids. I'm like, okay, I guess if I'm a fool, my daughter's going to marry a fool one day. But he used words like intentional. He's very intentional around how he acted, intentional with his words, intentional how he treated his wife. He said, because my daughter's watching me as her role model every single second, and that's what she's going to be looking for in her partner.
We're the gold standard for our kids. We really
Yeah.
are. And just got to try to do our best to raise that standard.
Yeah. And I bring it up with you, Chad, because you being vulnerable to your children, it's going to be what your children are looking for from their partner, right? I tried to do the same things. And I think sometimes, guys, maybe we get stuck with titles, right? Is that we think we're the dad. We think because we're dad, we have to be Superman. Yet I wonder, and I sometimes have to remind myself that I talk to my kids just like I'm talking to you guys. You're a human, I'm a human. The only difference is I got some experience on you. I'm fucking scared right now. I'm scared right now because I think I'm failing you as a human being. Oh, by the way, I'm a dad. And yeah, I'm taking my superhero cape off. I just wonder if that's what we need to do, right? Is take the title away from us, right, Chad? Because we put that title on and we all of a sudden think we have to be something.
But I think it's a fair statement, but also, and Chad, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but it's also opening up the dialogue to say, okay, what does it mean to be a great man or a great dad?
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing to say, what is a good dad? What is a good man? But that good to great, as Jim Collins always said, the only thing that holds us up, keeps us at being just good enough, is the fact that we're good enough.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, why strive for greatness if things are good enough? And so I think we have to challenge sort of the status quo. And what is this idea of what a man is? What's a husband? What's a father? Because I think you're absolutely right. When you start to think about what is my role, what is my identity, we have to go on what we know.
Yes.
Most of what we know has been modeled to us from our own parents or lack of parenting, etc. Right? History will repeat itself unless we do something about it. And I think we're doing something about it. And that's the point. We're all here talking about this. And that is huge. I think that is a massive shift. Because you know what? 30, 40 years ago, you wouldn't have a couple of men talking about being vulnerable on the radio. Like it just, you wouldn't be hearing this. Like it just, it wouldn't be that way. And but it's becoming more. Anyways, Chad, I'd like to hear your thoughts, man.
Both of you touched on this. Like it's redefining some of these things and getting a healthier definition. I was a couple months ago, a few months ago now, back in October, I was laying in bed with one of my kids, and he's 5, and he was struggling with some nightmares and things like that. And I was just a couple of days ahead from speaking at a church here in town, it's one of the largest churches in Alaska, and it was by far the biggest audience that I'd ever been in front of. So I was 2 or 3 days ahead of this, and he's sitting there. We're laying in bed, lights are off. I've prayed with him. We're just kind of in there, and I thought he's asleep, and he's just like, "Dad, when will I be brave? I wish I was brave like you, so I'd never be afraid." And I told him, I was like, "That I'm preaching at this church at church on Sunday." And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "I'm terrified." And I said, I'm trying to be brave, but it doesn't mean I'm not scared. And I told him, I said, "I don't think you can be brave without being scared. Because if I wasn't scared to go up there and talk to these people, then it doesn't require any courage. It doesn't require any bravery." So I said, "For you staying in your bed because you're scared, that's brave. If you weren't scared, it doesn't take any bravery." And I had that moment, and I have to remind myself of that. And hopefully that's a pivotal moment in his life. But I wish somebody told me that when I was 5 years old, and 7 and 10 and 25. Because so often we talk about, there's people, these gurus on YouTube and stuff, and no fear, and I'm fearless. If you're fearless, you're reckless. If you have no fear, then you're going to take unnecessary risks, and you're probably going to hurt yourself. Fear is a gift, but it's not, it just can't dictate us. And I think as fathers, we try to pretend like we don't have fear a lot of the times. And because we pretend we don't have it, it ends up dictating, it ends up shaping us because we don't face it. It just nudges, pushes this way. So I just think, for me, I've got to follow my own advice sometimes and step forward and not face that fear, not wait for the fear to subside, but to embrace, recognize that fear is going to be there. I've got to meet it head on and still move forward in the right direction. And to me, like, that's what courage looks like. And I'm learning that, again, that's what a father needs to do, is be able to face the fear, not pretend he doesn't have any.
Yes.
But just to not let the fear dictate decisions.
I love this because it just reminds me of that idea of rational versus irrational fear, right? And I remember Tim Ferriss did that TED talk about stoicism, right? And in it, he talks about this idea of this fear setting exercise. And it's something that I found my daughters have really, they've embraced it. We have fun when we have this kind of a conversation. What's the worst that could happen? When you find that thing that is making you feel uneasy, anxiety, stress, whatever, right? It's like, what is the worst thing that can happen? Because it helps with the rationalization. It's like, yeah, aliens could land and totally screw up the event. Is that likely to happen? It's like, so you can, by over embellishing the fear, I found at times it's easier to make it seem a lot smaller and rationalize it. And that's what you just reminded me of, Chad, because just the way that you would have talked to your 5-year-old, like, it's wonderful that you're able to empathize, but also he feels the empathy. Dad gets me, but also I'm just like dad. And he's still doing it. Like, what a great example. That's awesome. Anyways, got me all here in the feels.
Gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of episode number 3 here. Mr. Hufford, you have been an extraordinary guest. Clearly, we can have many conversations around these topics, the dynamics of your family, the dynamics of 6, traveling. I have a blended family. That all adds a whole new dynamic to the conversation. You talk about being fair and being vulnerable. I'll never forget the day sitting down with my kids and telling my kids that mom and dad were going to go through a divorce and a separation, and my daughter looking at me and saying, Dad, will you save me? Do you think about tearing things out of your heart, right? You're just those. So yeah. So just those kinds of conversations you have to keep having with your kids, right? Like yourself, Chad. I think as long as we keep talking to our kids, that's how we change the future.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Talk to our kids to change the future, right?
Yeah. And let them know we're just trying to be better. That's it. We're just going to keep striving to be better. But we need their patience, their understanding, their leadership. It's also putting the onus on our kids and letting them know that they're part of this. It's part of our family journey. We're all here trying to be better. And I'm going to make a lot of mistakes.
That's awesome. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said it that way, because I think sometimes that we don't. Now, so I just learned something, because you're right. Sometimes we do have to put onus on the kids, right? Because to be a family unit, and Chad, you actually taught me something too about this, that to be a family unit is to be a team. It can't always be about the parents.
Yeah. It's where we're going as a family.
Yeah.
It's great. I love it. This is an awesome, great conversation. I got to echo a lot of what he said. Chad, thank you, brother. This has been great.
It's been a pleasure to be here. I just thinking of elections coming up here in the U.S. and everybody's talking about all the change that they want to see, but I really think it has to happen in our homes. Like, the family units started changing, became more accountable, became more servant focused, others focused. We looked at our blessings as a way to impact the lives of those around us, and we upped the standards on our morals and our ability to impact those that maybe aren't as fortunate, and to make a ruckus, really, to ruffle feathers and push back against some of these things. But I think as fathers, we have the opportunity to have that start in our families. And if our families change, then our communities change, our cities change. Pretty soon, nations start changing, but it has to start inside our house, not the White House, not whatever house you have in Canada, but in our homes. I think that's where we can start. And as fathers, I believe it's one of our primary responsibilities. So I'll leave you guys with that thought. It is a tremendous honor to be here. Love chatting with you both. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Really grateful, Chad Hufford. Thanks for joining us today. And Manuel, Chad's going to change it himself. You think about the numbers he has 6. He starts becoming a grandparent with grandchildren. Next, Chad Hufford himself is going to change the American election in 2042, maybe. Right. So it's just by the law of his own numbers. Like one day, he's going to have like, think of 6 kids, grandchildren. You're going to have a brood of like 40, 50 people, Chad Hufford.
Also, he's gonna be a great grandpa too one day, because I know Chad's gonna live a long, vital life, and so just think you're gonna have you're gonna need a couple of those big, long yellow buses.
Buying school buses, yeah.
That's a good investment. Yes, I'll start investing in school buses for Anchorage for Mr. Hufford family.
I had to fight so hard to not be a van guy. Like now, you guys trying to make me a school bus guy. Gosh, no.
Keith Bilous and Manuel, two dads in a lab trying to be 2% better with the school bus guy. I'm going to get the last word. The school bus guy, Chad Hufford, driving out of here in the school bus. Chad, we'll see you again, my friend.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
All right, Di, that was awesome, man. Thanks for joining us, Chad. Di, that was fun, man.
That's always fun. Always fun. I learned a lot today, and these conversations with Chad, I'm like, but it was also a really nice reminder just about the power of vulnerability.
Yes.
And also to keep asking, what does it mean to be a great man? Great
dad?
Good questions. Great questions.
It's funny because that was the first question I asked you and I met in our first show, which was what's it like to be a good dad? Because I was having my struggles, right? And I have my struggles every single day. Every single day I struggle with it, man. I struggle every single day.
If you're living a life on purpose, there's going to be some struggle every day. It just is. It just is. It's like climbing Everest. And even if it's beautiful weather up there in the last pitch, it doesn't matter. You're on Everest, man. It's going to be a challenging no matter what. And I think being a parent, there's always going to be those challenges, but it's okay. We signed up for that, didn't we?
We did sign up for that. And you all signed up for two dads in a lab trying to be 2% better. We drop every Friday on all the podcast platforms. Please leave us. So Melissa's like, Keith, you got to make sure that you got to tell people to subscribe and like and give ratings and reviews. So Keith and Di are building up a database of shows. This is our 3rd one now. So we've got a couple more. We're going to blast them out there on the podcast platform. So download and enjoy it. And if you're a dad listening to this and you got something to say, come knock on our door.
Totally.
Come join the conversation. All right, Di, let's get out of here.
Thanks, brother. I'll see you next week.
You betcha. Family Day weekend. We'll see you guys. See you next week.
Peace out.